The Florida Panthers are on the precipice. This is NHL Wraparound Stanley Cupdate for June 15th, 2025. Happy Father's Day to all the dads listening out there. Vic and Neil with you to recap fifth game of the Stanley Cup Final. And it was a dud.
Oh, was it ever a dud? And by the way, what does precipice mean?
It means on the cusp, on the verge.
Oh, on the precipice, on the verge, on the cusp, on the edge. I think that has to be the biggest letdown for 20,000 fans in that building last night to see the Panthers come out and just early annihilation of the Oilers on the scoreboard. Just knocked them right out of the game so fast.
Let's get into that, because you had made mention that you thought it was somewhat of a disadvantage for the Oilers to only have one day off after the grueling travel to get back to Edmonton following Game 4. I looked at the NBA schedule, and that played no effect in this game being played on Saturday with only one day off in between 4 and 5. Neither of the two buildings had any other events surrounding it. So that wasn't the effect either. So the only piece that makes sense is that the NHL was so married to having a game on Saturday night that I believe they actually helped compromise their own product by playing this game on Saturday as opposed to Sunday, with a normal 2 days off for travel in between.
And I guess I did say this yesterday. If I'm Stan Bowman and Chris Knobloch, I'm screaming, because you only get 1 day between the Florida game and your home game. You're going home for an important home game. You get only 24 hours off. Now the Panthers get 48 hours off going back to play their home game. I just don't think that that's even Steven.
You have to remember also that the Edmonton-Dallas Conference Final was going to start on Saturday if the previous series had ended on a Thursday. They were going to start that series on Saturday for network television. And instead, that conference final didn't wind up starting until the following Wednesday. So they wound up having 4 extra days off instead of playing that Saturday, which would have come with only 1 day rest, I believe, for Dallas. So the bottom line here is that we understand the importance of television. We understand the importance of network windows. But if you were going to create somewhat of an imbalance for one or both teams by being married to that Saturday night slot, it's not doing the game any good.
I think that you give a team an excuse. You give a team a reason to say this isn't fair. You would know this better than I. How much influence do you think TNT has on the scheduling of the games?
I don't think as much as Rogers or ABC, because in the States, ABC, obviously, it's over the air. And in Canada, Hockey Night in Canada has been a staple for decades and decades. And I think that's the allure of having the game on a Saturday as opposed to Sunday, where it really should have been.
I don't know. I don't like when things are imbalanced and somebody can come up with excuses and reasons and things. And I think this could be used by the Edmonton faithful as a reason that they got screwed.
Perhaps. And oh, by the way, just before I get off my soapbox here, if Game 5 had been played tonight, being Sunday, Game 6 would have been Wednesday, and Game 7, your showcase event, would have been next Saturday, the 21st, as opposed to the potential of it being on Friday, the 20th. So there you go. Okay, step down off the soapbox, please. I'm off the soapbox, and I'm going to put you on your pedestal here because you were the one that came on yesterday and said Calvin Pickard will be getting the start in the Edmonton net. And indeed he did. I think in the end game, it really didn't matter who was in there because Florida was dominant and the Oilers were that flat in Game 5.
I agree with you, and I didn't see any goals scored on Pickard that I would have said that's a bad goal. I don't remember any. Certainly on the fifth goal, he had no chance at all.
Here you go with your empty net humor again.
I figured they would put Pickard in, and let's see if I can get the next one right. I'm saying they'll go back to Stuart Skinner in Sunrise for the next game.
What we're all waiting on. But we do have the rest of the game to recap here because I thought the Oilers came out okay in the early going. Connor Brown had a great rink-length rush. The first half minute of the game, Connor McDavid, partial 2-on-1, a little bit after that. But once the Oilers got past that point, their game kind of flatlined. And Brad Marchand had two really good chances. The second one, coming at the 9:12 mark, breaking through on a center ice faceoff. I mean, you think that there is probably no more benign play in hockey than a faceoff at center ice. But he beats Paul Cozen, and then he splits the defense, moving past T.S. Ekholm, who did not have a very good night on this evening. Holds the puck, beats Pickard over his glove, 1-0. And from that point on, Panthers simply had their way the entire night.
And it was a terrific goal. I mean, just a terrific goal. And it also was one of those goals. I don't know if you felt this way when you saw it. It's like, oh, this is not good. This is not good. The grit showing up and playing right now over the talent. And what I'm trying to say is the gutsiness, the ballsiness of Marchand and the way he plays, and he pulled his way down and scored. This was not Connor McDavid over to Draisaitl for this beautiful goal to give them the 1-0 lead. This was the little nuts and bolts guy, Marchand, going in there and saying, I'm taking the game. I mean, that's the way I felt, that it started like that.
If I told you at that point that wasn't even his best goal of the night, what would you have said?
No, I wouldn't have believed you. I'd say, how do you get one better than that?
Well, he did, and we're going to get to that in a couple of moments. But after the first Oiler power play of the game generated literally nothing, Ekholm turns the puck over in the neutral zone. Good pressure by Evan Rodriguez. And then it's Bennett to Tkachuk. He shoots, and Bennett converts on the rebound off of the block shot. It's 2-0. 15th goal of the playoffs for Sam Bennett. 13 on the road. And what do they say about players? That it's always easy to play in your own building because you can have a certain bravado there. But to be able to produce on the road the way Bennett has right now, it is hard to imagine anybody on Florida except him being the Conn Smythe Trophy winner if the Panthers go on to win the Stanley Cup.
Well, and the other thing about Bennett is he's not just scoring goals. He's also pissing the other team off continuously. In almost every game, something happens with something physical with Bennett where everybody's up in arms over this guy. And I agree with you on the Conn Smythe Trophy. I don't see how it goes anywhere else. Let me comment on the quick break at 31 seconds that Brown had. I don't know if you noticed this, but Tkachuk let up on him. Tkachuk stopped skating. Luckily for him, Bobrovsky makes the glove save. I was really surprised when I saw 19 on a replay that he let up.
That turned out to be the only shot by a forward from the Oilers in that entire first period. They got outshot 8-3. The other two shots in the first period coming from defensemen. And the Oilers, and you had said this going into Game 5, that they cannot continue to play from behind as they have done. In Games 3, 4, and 5, the Panthers have outscored the Oilers 7-0 in the first period. And they're chasing the game over and over and over again.
Yeah. I think they've been a slow starting team during the regular season. When I was looking constantly at goals scored by period, I think the Oilers' goals went up as the game went on. And certainly that's been relevant in these playoffs. I want to say one other thing, Vic, while I'm thinking about it. Bennett's goal, was it not very reminiscent of Bouchard's goal when he shot? It got blocked by Barkov, right back onto his stick, shot it again and scored. If you didn't see that goal last night, that's how it happened. But it was two different guys, obviously.
Right.
It was a shot blocked by Edmonton, right to Bennett. Bennett just pumps the rebound off of that blocker into the net. It reminded me of the Bouchard goal from earlier in the series.
The second period, Bobrovsky had to make a good pad save on another power play, stopped Corey Perry from in close. And then Connor McDavid hit a post during another power play. But for the most part, I thought that the Panthers' positioning, their gap control, their movements, everything was controlled. It was measured. And even though the Oilers had an 8-5 edge in shots in the second period, wasn't a lot of quality there. And the building was dead. It was almost as if 20,000 people had made that trip from Florida to Edmonton and they just had no juice to root them on.
This, Vic, is typical, to me, was a typical Canadian crowd. Because first of all, there's no way that any of the Canadian crowds are as rambunctious as an American crowd. They're just not. They're too studious of the game. So when the game's starting, the place is electric. It's wild. The national anthems, the whole bit. But it doesn't take much to put them, just sit them in their seats and watch the game and not be saying much. It really doesn't. And that's what happened here, is that they went back to studying the game, looking at the game, fretting about the game because, of course, Florida had taken this early lead. And whereas an American crowd will still keep cheering and screaming and chanting and all the rest of it, in the Canadian buildings, it doesn't take much to just quiet them down.
We've heard the term so often, the perfect road game. And that's exactly what Florida is playing. And when you're the home team and you're getting smothered like that, it is very easy to create that type of environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we talked yesterday about what do the Oilers need to do? What do the Panthers need to do? Well, the Panthers did what they needed to do in this game. They got the lead like they've been doing, but they clamped down on that lead. And the Oilers didn't do what we said they needed to do, which was not let the Panthers get the lead, right? So that they couldn't clamp down on it. And so one team did what we said they had to do, and the other team didn't.
But the Oilers have still been comfortable coming back from multi-goal deficits. But how often can you do that? So they're down 2-0 heading into the third period. And then we just mentioned that Marchand's first goal was beautiful, and it wasn't even his best goal of the night because at the 5:12 mark, beats Corey Perry out of his own defensive zone, heads up ice, takes a little tip pass from Luostarinen, and then goes inside out on Jake Wallman, his sixth goal of the series. And TNT had Matthew Tkachuk mic'd up, and usually I could go really hit or miss on those because more often than not, it's a little bit of cheering on the bench and then when a guy scores, and that's pretty much the end of it. But Tkachuk was so taken by it that he just said, "Oh my God," like 5 or 6 times. And the brilliance of that goal, the hands, the ability to bull his way through and get into the Oilers zone and then make that move on Wallman, special goal. It was a McDavid-esque type move.
It was. And you know what was one of the best things about that goal? And go back, everybody, and watch this, because this is the awareness of Marchand to not try to grab the loose puck in the neutral zone, but to head up ice, knowing that Luostarinen would knock it up to him. And Luostarinen, with one hand on his stick, sort of poked it up to give it to Marchand to try to get that half breakaway. And Marchand grabbed it and then made that spectacular move over Wallman. Wallman ended up falling and going into the net himself. I mean, if that's not one of the top goals of the season, I don't know what is.
And let's talk about Marchand a little bit more here. He's an unrestricted free agent, and you think about the value that he has had to the Panthers, and you go back to the great years that he had in Boston. He's only making, and I say only in relative terms based on contribution versus other players, $6.125. Is this a player whose value at age 37 is actually increasing?
Oh, I think he'll get a big short-term deal. That's what I think. Somebody will give him a big short-term deal. Speaking of the Conn Smythe Trophy and Sam Bennett, I agree with you that Sam Bennett, no matter how spectacular those goals were last night, Sam Bennett will probably be the odds-on favorite if the Panthers win the Cup. But Marchand will get a lot of votes, I think, for the Conn Smythe, just based upon the timing of his goals, the spectacular nature of his goals, the contribution he's given to a team that he just joined at the deadline. I think some of the voters will be hard-pressed to decide which way to go on this. I think they should go with Sam Bennett because he's done his stuff. Yeah. But boy, Marchand has been spectacular. Here's another thing. As you know, I'm very intrigued by the trading deadline for obvious reasons. But this has got to be one of the best trade deadline deals in history for the impact that this guy has had if they win the Cup.
Is there any comparative that you can draw? Because I think a lot of people would look back to 1980 and the Islanders' acquisition of Butch Goring, which was really the key to turning that club around to winning 4 consecutive Stanley Cups. We don't know what the future is going to hold for the Panthers. Right now, they're 1 game away from going back-to-back. But are there any other deals out there that you can remember where a single player made so much difference at the deadline?
I don't know. Like in just this one final, I don't remember Butch even having this glaring of a difference in the 80 Cup, and maybe I'm just not remembering it right. You could say that Stefan Matteau for our team, by getting those 2 double overtime goals, had an amazing impact, but certainly not the spectacular play that Marchand has given them, and not a top 6 forward that ends up on the third line that just gives them unbelievable depth for this playoff. Maybe Rob Blake pushing the Colorado Avalanche for the year with Ray Bourque. He came in at the deadline and gave them something. But this is a spectacular acquisition, the way this has turned out. I didn't see this coming this clear. All I thought of, and we talked about, was the irritating nature of Marchand, and he'd be joining guys like Tkachuk and Sam Bennett. And would they maybe have too much of this ingredient now? But I didn't see him going head-to-head with Connor McDavid for spectacular offense.
Third-line player, and he'd be a top 6 on 31 other clubs in the NHL.
The way he's playing is it's something very, very special.
McDavid did manage to get his first goal of the final, the 7:24 mark, but you talk about a club that is mature, doesn't panic, knows how to answer right back. 46 seconds later, Alex Barkov stripped Corey Perry behind the Edmonton net. He gets it out front, and Sam Reinhart wires one to make it 4-1. So any momentum that the Oilers may have had from getting on the scoreboard, remember we said the other day, momentum is as good as its first 6 letters. And that's certainly the case here.
And you know what I love, though, about McDavid's goal, other than it was a spectacular deke on probably the best playoff goalie in the world right now, Bobrovsky, was that he didn't lift his stick up in the air when they scored. He understood the meaning of the goal was that this is not a celebration. Okay, we've got 1. We're still behind by 2. And as you said, though, that was quickly answered by Sam Reinhart, and sort of the whatever little balloon was in the building from the goal by McDavid got popped 46 seconds later by Sam Reinhart's shot.
Corey Perry did manage to get a second goal for the Oilers, kind of a 55-foot shot from out near the blue line that went in through a screen with 3:13 left, with the Oilers having Pickard pulled. But the urgency level, way too late. And by that time, Florida's also sitting back a little bit just to protect this 3-goal lead. And then Luosterainen sews it up with an empty netter with 1:19 left. But I wanted to hit you with this stat, Neil, because I don't think we've heard it anywhere yet. And I got up early this morning to actually put this together. This is kind of an instinctual thing. But it turns out that it is exactly correct. And we had spoken, you specifically pointing out that it doesn't help the Oilers to be playing from behind, chasing games this early. In games 1 through 5, the Oilers have led for 33 minutes and 51 seconds. That is 9.4% of the total playing time in the series. Conversely, the Panthers have led for 200 minutes and 25 seconds, and that is just under 56% of the total time played in this series.
That's a great stat and something that should be out there and will be out there from NHL Wraparound. And that sort of goes to tell you what this series has been. I think this series has been 56% Florida, 9% Oilers.
There you have it. And the series has only been tied for a little less than 35%. So when you think of how much time the Panthers have been playing with the lead here, and I think you had said this in our show yesterday, that this series probably should be done by now because the Panthers were unable to hold a couple of leads in this series.
It could have been actually 4 straight for Florida, and it certainly could have been over in 5, and we'll see if it's over in 6. And I know we're going to get to this, but I can't imagine any more motivation that you could possibly have than wanting to not go back to Edmonton.
And it's a completely different circumstance for the Panthers this time around because they were ahead 3-2 a year ago, but they were also heading back to Edmonton against an Oiler team that had won 2 straight to get themselves back into this series. And the question here for the Panthers, will they be able to nail this thing down? And I think it will speak to the complete maturity and the growth of this club between last year's championship and this point now, if they are indeed able to do that.
I agree with you. It is going to say a lot. And let me ask you this before we get to Game 6. Which Panther team is better, the 24 version or the 25 version?
Even without having won their second cup, because that's still pending, obviously, I think it's this team. Because I think you go through making the final, you find out certain things about yourself in 2023 in their loss to the Vegas Golden Knights. And, of course, they lost Matthew Tkachuk later on in that series with the broken sternum also. You come back, you win the Stanley Cup. You have pulled from what you have learned in 23, you apply it to 24. You're chasing it at that point. Now you're defending. And there is that confidence that you have in knowing that you've been able to lock the thing down and get it done, albeit in 7 games, albeit that they almost blew a 3-0 lead. But at the same time, they got it done. And once you get it done, I think that there is a confidence that there is nothing that we cannot meet as a challenge. And I think that's what we're starting to see here.
I also think that Bill Zito and his staff added key elements to the 24 team, regardless of the players that they lost in the offseason. And they did lose a number of guys right away from that Stanley Cup team. But boy, the acquisition of Seth Jones on defense and now the aforementioned Brad Marchand up front, you think about those guys, they're key players to the teams that they've been on. Like, they're the guys, when you're watching Chicago, you notice Seth Jones. When you watch Columbus and Nashville, when Seth Jones was there, you always noticed him. He's a steady Eddie guy. Number 63, you only have to say the number and everybody knows who you're talking about. You don't say the team even, just say number 63 and they all know Marshall. You add those two guys, those hungry veterans that Brad Marchand's won one cup. He got close a couple times. Seth Jones has never been close, really, to winning a Stanley Cup, and this is his opportunity, and yet a mega-talented guy. Those are two great acquisitions, and although they lost Stolarz to Toronto, the backup goaltender, they haven't had to go and use Vanacek, who is the replacement for Stolarz, who they got. They didn't lose anything there because they haven't had to go there. But I think that this is a better team than last year's team. I do. I think it's more talented than the team they had last year, which I find hard to believe because of the losses they took.
Brandon Montour, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Steven Lorentz, and Anthony Stolarz, all gone from the team that won last year, and they haven't missed a beat this time around.
No, not at all. In fact, if they are to win in 6, they've had a better showing in the final than they had last year.
That'd be true. But Edmonton's going to have something to say about that. And you've already said you believe that Chris Knoblauch will go back to Stu Skinner in goal. Let me pose one other question to you, because we have seen Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl play together at certain points during games. Do you just throw caution to the wind here and put them on the same line, or does it make it too easy for the Panthers to defend the bottom 9 forwards?
Got to do something drastically different than you had in Game 5, right? You got to do something.
Yeah.
And that may be the change that they decide to make. And they just go with it, and they hope that they can get the lead and get some power play time and score first for once. So let's see what he does. Maybe he will.
And maybe he starts the game with the two of them together. And if they can get a lead, then maybe separate them after that point. But certainly Paul Maurice is going to have his say because he's got last change also.
That's right. And he's got his number 16 wearing the captaincy that's ready to defend, along with number 13, Sam Reinhart, who is runner-up for the Selke Trophy. So you got those two guys on the same team. And the amazing part about Sam Reinhart is he scores goals and kills you, and then comes out and kills penalties and kills you. And imagine, he was on the Buffalo Sabres.
So were a lot of guys that have had success.
Yeah. Jack Eichel, has anybody heard that name?
Yeah. 2 years ago, Stanley Cup champion. So Panthers try to put a bow on the repeat Tuesday, 8 o'clock TNT. And if a 7th game is necessary, it will be back in Edmonton on Friday at 8 o'clock. Kind of a light news day on this Father's Day, but depending on where you look, there's either a couple of hundred or upwards of over 500 restricted or unrestricted free agents that will be hitting the market on July 1st. And among the more prominent names in the restricted area, Evan Bouchard, Matthew Nyes, J.J. Peterka, Gabe Vilardi, Marco Rossi, Mason McTavish, and Dmitry Voronkov of the Columbus Blue Jackets. And the question that I have for you here is Devils GM Tom Fitzgerald believes that we may see more offer sheets this summer, similar to what Doug Armstrong pulled off last summer, getting Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway away from the Edmonton Oilers. You have kind of disputed whether or not we may see a trend towards this, but with the salary cap going up And I think you've got half of the league, as of right now, has over $20 million in cap space. Can we see more offer sheets? Is this going to be a new way of doing business?
I think the only way it's a new way of doing business is if there's a team who leaves themselves vulnerable to attack, like Edmonton did last year. So I don't think you're going to see Pat Verbeek in Anaheim or whoever, Mike Greer in San Jose, try to sign a restricted free agent who can be easily matched by his own team. Because now you really have just screwed everybody in the league because you made the salaries go up and you never got the guy. And where have we heard that before? Hello, Joe Sakic.
Right.
I mean, you just, all you do is you F up the league's salary structure and you don't get the player. So you're the villain to the rest of the league and your own fans aren't even happy with you because you didn't get what you went out to try to get.
Well, it's an interesting point because did those two players not really deliver for the Blues this year?
They did, but my point is that he went and did something that he knew they couldn't respond to. And so if you find a situation like that, I agree, attack, because you know you're going to get the player. I hate to keep bringing up the past, but Adam Graves. I knew I had Adam Graves if I signed him, right? They couldn't match. Same thing with this in today's game. If you know a team can't match, go ahead and use this. And to hell with them if they're mad. But if they can match, why would you bother?
Where is a team more vulnerable? Is it strictly money, or is it the number of first-round picks that you're going to have to surrender?
Well, you don't have to surrender that much anymore like you did in the old days. You know, I think it's more how much money are you going to throw at somebody and overpay them, because you have to overpay them and take into consideration what you're going to lose. But you don't lose like you used to lose because the CBA and the Players Association wanted to encourage teams to use their offer sheets. And so that's why the compensation came down.
I think it's going to be fascinating to watch this piece of free agency in about 2 weeks' time. It is now time for the Father's Day edition of
This Day in Stanley Cup History.
2 of the original 6 clinched their most recent Stanley Cups on this date. We're going to start in 2015, where the Blackhawks defeated the Lightning 2-0 in Game 6 at the United Center. This was the first Stanley Cup win for the Blackhawks at home since 1938, when Mike Kourakis was their goaltender. Corey Crawford, 25 saves, goals by Duncan Keith and Patrick Kane in this one. Keith was the Conn Smythe Trophy winner with 18 assists and a +16 during that playoff. He averaged over 31 minutes per game during the course of that Stanley Cup run and almost 30 minutes during the final. He was an absolute beast because if you remember, that Chicago backline was really beat up. And in that final, they went primarily with only 4 defensemen. It was Keith, Nick Yarmouson, Glenn Seabrook, and Johnny Oduya. And then they rotated 4 other defensemen in to fill out that bottom third pair. But none of them played more than 9 minutes and 1 second in any game of that final. So that was an absolutely heroic effort by Keith and the other 3 Blackhawks defensemen in that series that I think falls under the radar very often.
It fell under my radar because you're just telling me about it now, and I didn't even realize it. So kudos to you.
And in 2011, the Boston Bruins win their first Stanley Cup since 1972, blanking Vancouver 4-0 in the 7th game. Dries Bergeron and Brad Marchand each scored twice, the latter becoming the first rookie to score 2 goals in the 7th game of a final. Tim Thomas had 37 saves in winning the Conn Smythe Trophy, giving up just 8 goals in the final. had a 1.98 goals against average, 940 save percentage, and 4 shutouts in 25 games. The Bruins lost 3 one-goal games in Vancouver in that final, including the second game in overtime. And they outscored the Canucks 17-3 in the 3 home wins heading into Game 7. And I maintained after Game 4 of that series that the Canucks were going to try to play that final to win just their home games because they had very little interest in delivering the compete level necessary in Boston to even play close in those games. They were awful. And they got what they deserved in Game 7.
Yeah, which was right in their own barn.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I know you will, they had won the President's Trophy.
Correct. That will wrap up Stanley Cupdate for Father's Day. Again, all the dads out there, have a great day. Be celebrated. Neil and I return Monday with NHL Wraparound, and our guest will be Anaheim Ducks GM Pat Verbeek. Enjoy the rest of the day.